Projects Committee meeting, and we are going to, in order to accommodate one of our guest speakers, I'd like to make some modest changes in the agenda. I'd like to take legislation first, then we'll come back for all the other items. So, Ms. Wills.
Thank you. And actually, I'm going to switch up the order, and we're going to do the state update first. That's because fine. Mr. Watts is needed in Sacramento shortly.
Right. We need you in Sacramento.
Somebody does. I'm not sure who. I am scheduled to be on the first special session hearing agenda later this morning, so thank you for your kind adjustment here. I thought I'd catch you up on two things. Last time I was here, the budget was still pending. There was good news for transportation generally. It wasn't a significant major budget for transportation, but there were some good elements in it. And I thought I'd let you know how those turned out. And then I'd talk briefly about the special session, how it works briefly, and then tell you about the bills that are in special session. And then lastly, I thought I'd catch you up on a bill of great interest, which is Assemblymember Frazier's tolling legislation, AB 194. So I'll just get right into it if that's all right. The budget and the budget trailer bill, AB 95, for transportation included a couple of key things that I wanted to highlight. First and foremost, there's a allocation for funding for Caltrans to develop a shelf of shop projects, and it includes 25 positions, and the target amount is to develop a $500 million shelf in anticipation that in addition to the regular resources that the transportation funding may come to a conclusion this summer, and that there'll be more resources available. Amtrak funding, as I mentioned the last time I was here, the full amount of funding from the state to the intercity rail corridors was included in the budget, and that's a good thing. It shows that they're maintaining their commitment to the intercity corridors. There was a little element that's most applicable to the local transit agencies here that was included in the trailer bill, and that's a continuation for one more year of an exemption, a modest exemption against the cost increase standard that's associated with the transit assistance program, state grants to transit operators. Some have not been able to catch up with, get their costs still in line with CPI as a hangover from the recession, and this allows them another year to get close to that efficiency target. And last but not least, second year in a row added to the budget trailer bill were additional green stickers for HOV access for clean vehicles. The amount now is $85,000, but I think the legislature said that's our historic high. We're not adding any more. We're now at the limit. The pressing need to do this, according to the legislature, was they were running out of stickers, and they're selling the plug-in hybrids at a very, very rapid rate. Cap and trade was the other major issue in the transportation, in the budget itself. It does affect transportation. If you recall, the cap and trade agreement enacted in statute last year dedicated 60% to several programs, including high-speed rail, local transit, and some state transit and rail programs. And the other 40% was left for the governor to propose in the budget. The funding for the 60% was provided. The funding for the 40% was not provided. It's being held over for continued negotiations in the rest of the summer on a parallel track to towards the end of session. So they have not formally started discussions on that 40%. There's a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes, and we'll see some framework start to emerge probably as we get closer to the summer recess. One interesting development and last comment on the budget, there's been a confusing element related to outstanding obligations from the general fund to transportation. There was a category that had been maintained and tracked by Caltrans that was not tracked by the Department of Finance, and that was worth about $1 billion of pre-Proposition 42 suspensions and transfers. One of the things we were able to do in the budget was reclassify it formally to be considered a general fund obligation. It is now in line to be paid back from the general fund. It may not happen yet, but it's probably going to be included in any transportation package that emerges. And if one does not merge, it's still in position to start seeing those funds returned. About half that money is owed to Governor Davis's TCRP program recipients, where a number of them were left without funding after 2008. They were called Tier 2. They were project sponsors around the state who were unable to accept grants on a cash flow basis and front the money and then get paid back in arrears. Those would probably go to the head of the line. So I'll share the Tier 2 list for the Bay Area and for Contra Costa. I don't think there is a Contra Costa project on the Tier 2 list. Is there one? Okay. Okay, great. Well, then this is going to be worth an extra push to make sure that this gets incorporated, because it's money that was not expected to be returned and now is eligible. So I think that's a pretty decent development. Turning to the special session, June 16th, the governor did call the legislature into special session. There were two of them, one on transportation infrastructure and one on health care. Special session 1 on transportation is moving more rapidly as far as I can determine. The committees have been established, bills have been introduced, and I thought it'd be worth just touching on a few technical points about a special session. The governor's proclamation is a key to the framework for the special session. Whatever's listed in there is the range of germaneness for legislation to be adopted. So just to touch on that, the governor did call for legislation to enact pay-as-you-go permanent and sustainable funding targeted at maintaining and repairing the state and other state transportation and other critical infrastructure. It's interesting that those last three words, other critical infrastructure, it's now dawning on folks in Sacramento that there could be legislation and negotiations and discussions in water and other state infrastructure needs. So right now the focus has been on transportation, but it does open the door to that. The governor also called on improving key trade corridors and legislation to complement local efforts for repair and improvements of local transportation infrastructure. You take those three together, and what the conclusion a lot of us have come to is that the governor's really focused on doing something legislatively, new revenues for state transportation purposes, and maybe some tools for local government, tools like reduced voter threshold for sales taxes, or improving the enhanced IFD statute that was enacted in a hurry last year. But nobody's expecting him, and he's not signaling so far that he's willing to consider new revenues for local. So the focus up there, as we will see unfold, will be to make sure that local roadway repair and needs are addressed in the special session. Interestingly, they also had two other points of clear points of interest. He wants to have the state funding distributed or held accountable against performance objectives, looking at percentage of pavement, bridge, and culverts in good condition. This is something that Secretary Kelly's been pushing through the CTIP process that we've talked about from time to time, so it's not a surprise to see it here. And I think the other interesting element that the governor is looking for project development efficiencies to expedite project delivery or reduce project costs. We think that is making another run at maybe improving the current design build law, maybe adding CMGC as a tool for state and locals, as well as public-private partnership funding. It could be others, but those are the ones that seem to be on the list. The committees. The Senate adopted a new committee called the Transportation Infrastructure Development Committee, has 13 members. This county has, up until last year, had really good representation on the Transportation Committee through now Congressman DeSaulnier. At this point, the Bay Area has very limited representation on this new committee. Senator Bell is the chairman, and Senator Wieckowski from Alameda County is the only other Bay Area person on the committee. There is an appropriation committee, and there are only 2 out of 7 that are from the Bay Area. Again, Senator Bell and then Senator Hill from San Mateo. So the Bay Area is not positioned as well as the other regions of the state as we go into these committees. In the Assembly, Mr. Frazier continues as the chair of that Transportation Infrastructure Development Committee. It has 13 members. It does have a little bit better representation from the Bay Area. But notably, the member from Contra Costa who was on the regular session Transportation Committee, Catherine Baker, is not on this committee. So the East Bay has lost one bit of influence on that committee. And the Finance Committee, similar story as to the Senate side. It's more loaded for the rest of the state. A couple points to keep in mind as a special session unwinds. There's a couple of rules that apply that apply in regular session that don't apply in special session. Bills don't have to wait 30 days to be heard. They could be introduced and literally scheduled within a day or two. They adopted rules to exempt special session hearings from the 4-day and 2-day notice requirements. But I think they're going to try to abide by as much lead time as they can. Where this gets a little interesting is when you get closer towards getting a deal on something, they can set hearings immediately, literally within a regular session, recess, open up the special session, call a committee hearing, and if you're not paying attention, you won't have an opportunity to participate in that. So that's some of the things we have to consider. And the most important aspect of a special session is that regular majority vote bills become effective 91 days after the special session is adjourned. That's the value of the special session in most cases, because it allows you to do policy changes and they become effective without needing an urgency clause. Taxes, however, still require a 2/3 vote. There's no change to that. I'll just tell you about the several bills that are already in special session. Senator Bell reintroduced his SB 16, which was his multiple source funding package, into special session. It's SB X.11. Senator Huff also carried over from the regular session into special session constitutional amendment. It's SCA X.11. In the regular session, it was SCA 7. It is intended to be the Republican tool to lock in any new revenues that are adopted in the legislative session that may not be covered under Article 19 or other articles of the Constitution. So what you read now is what it is, but it will change to reflect whatever agreement. It would have to go on the ballot to be enacted. Finally, Mr. Alejo in the Assembly has introduced a bill that would recapture truck weight fees and also accelerate some of the repayments that I mentioned or alluded to at the earlier part of the presentation. And Assemblymember Perret has reintroduced his version from the regular session into special session of the extension of the public-private partnership legislation. So with that, that's what I know about the special session. Just to update you, I'm attending the Senate hearing this afternoon, giving a presentation on revenue sources. Your executive director is participating in Monday's hearing in the Assembly. You're on the list.
Yeah, make sure you note that. Okay, so are there questions? So I had one. I remember in a prior month you've talked about a bill that would raise the allowable sales tax cap, and I just wonder what the status of that was.
It's moving, but it's been adjusted. The last set of amendments delay the increase till after 2016. So the 2% cap under the bill as it sits today would exist through 2016, and then it would go to 3%.
So it's still a 1% increase?
It's still a 1% increase,
Okay,
but it's just
but delayed. Okay.
Chair, may I answer?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Russ Chittenden. Mark, last week the CTC adopted their STIP fund estimate, essentially zero. So do you have any thoughts about possibility of that being resolved in special session? And the reason I ask is we have a STIP call for projects out, and Hisham and I are debating whether we suspend that or cancel that. And
This issue was the subject that gave rise to their adoption, which was the price-based excise tax adjustment going reduced by 6 cents a gallon. The subject of really intense discussions between the administration and the legislature. There is a bill that would have smoothed things out and would have reduced the hit by several pennies per gallon. It is intended to be addressed in the special session. We haven't seen a bill yet, but the administration's point was they didn't want to enact the bill that was in front of them in favor of doing something in special session that might be more robust for transportation. But this, as you know, the CTC has to act on what's the law now. So the clarion call for chopping STIP projects has been issued.
so for the committee, I think Hisham and I are going to proceed and ask the sponsors to submit their nominations, but we probably won't go through and score them until we hear that there's actual funding.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and the last point I wanted to raise was an update on AB 194, the tolling legislation. The administration tossed it over their amendments over the transom the night before last to the author's office. We're all taking a hard look at it. Probably the most interesting aspect is they took the framework of the current bill and made their adaptations to that framework rather than trying to start with their own bill that they had been trying to circulate and try to get into the budget process. So I think that's a healthy start. There are probably elements in there I haven't read yet, so I can't comment too much on it. One provision that was something that the Bay Area, and with Mr. Frazier's guidance, had in AB 194 is continued. So that was a good sign that the administration didn't want to walk back from that Bay Area agreement, which allows agreements between MTC and the individual local transportation agencies for project development of the toll projects. So we'll have a conference call next week with the self-help counties to more thoroughly vet the bill and see what warts need to be shaved off.
All right, very good. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Thank you. Drive safely or take the train.
I have to take the car this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just
If you want to proceed then with
wanted
the
to
federal.
give you, a quick
Right.
update. There should be a handout in front of you on the dais, which is a memo from our federal advocate outlining the elements of the new DRIVE Act, which was introduced by the Senate Environment Public Works. Senate Environment Public Works Committee. And this is, I think, a really good first step. It has a lot of the elements in there that we championed in our federal advocacy platform, and when we were in DC themselves, we actually visited the EPW committee, and I'm very encouraged because some of these elements in here are things that we talked about explicitly with them, things like having a long-term bill. This is a 6-year bill, and if you kind of look through this, there is a lot of mention of technology and ITS grants and some focus on freight. And one of the things that I know Ross and Randy have been championing on the transit side of the House, there's a letter of no prejudice, and we're working to try to incorporate that in on the highway side of the House as well. So it's very encouraging. I think that they have heard us, and they're working to try to make this bill friendly to local agencies. So this is a really positive first step. Of course, it's still got to go through all the committees that fund it. So where it goes from here, it still remains to be seen, especially with the current one set to expire again on July 31st. So I don't know that this will be complete by then, but at least there's something on the table to work with. And just as a little side note, a few weeks ago, Randy was contacted by Senator Maria Cantwell to talk about a potential freight bill that they were looking to introduce, and that got introduced last week. It's a freight investment bill, so we'll be watching that really carefully to see what happens. Do you want to add a comment?
No, they're looking for a letter of support from us, and so we read the bill, and it looks pretty good. We made some comments about how we approach the TCIF, the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund, in Proposition 1B. And, you know, it's surprising as you build relationships, and I think that's, as the future goes on, we should still continue to meet with the Environment and Public Works Committee, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and keep those relationships going. It's important. I think we've been to Washington, D.C. at least together as my tenure here, and now we're getting the things that we're looking for embedded in the bill. So, and then they're calling us out of the blue. Senator Cantwell's team called us out of the blue and said, "Can you read this? Can you give us comments?" So it's pretty important to do that. I mean, there's a value to that, and we've not gone back to Washington other than to ask for support on our Tiger grants for money per se, but we've asked for regulation reform, and these things are going to save us money in the future. And so we're really excited. At least staff is excited about we're making headway, and we're being recognized. And, you know, we're a group of 20 people, but we're being called by these pretty powerful senators and assembly members and congressmen or people in Congress to help give our inputs. That's pretty good for us.
Very good.
And so I think perhaps then we'd be looking for the committee's support to allow staff to write a letter of support for both the Drive Act bill in front of you and the freight investment bill.
Okay. All right. There's a motion, a second by Commissioner Pierce and a second by Commissioner Arnerich to authorize staff to draft letters in support of two bills. Commissioner Butt, did you have a comment?
No, I was going to second it.
They're so fast. They are so fast. It is.
If you're slow, you don't have a chance.
That's right. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Is there anything else under legislation? Okay, thank you. So let's now go back to the beginning of the agenda. And is there any public comment? This is an opportunity for people to comment on items that are within our jurisdiction but not on today's agenda. We'll take public comment on the agenda items as we go through them.
Don, I just want to introduce somebody that's here today. There's an intern who's been working with myself and my fellow council members. His name is Eric Zhao. He has written doing research for Bishop Ranch to do a statistical summary analysis of their transportation needs. There are 10 million square feet of space. It's the single largest employment center in Contra Costa County, with 30,000 people a day commuting in and out of that facility. And he's put together a really interesting kind of a summary as we go through and look at ways to sort of help that corridor. So he's also helping us on two legislative pieces for ordinances that we're looking at. And by the way, he's just going to be a junior in high school at Cal High in Santa Monica. So anyway, welcome.
Welcome.
I'm sorry, Doherty High. Gosh, why did I say Cal High? Sorry,
right.
Doherty High School.
We should have an opening for him in 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? I think, Randy, you might. So anyway, welcome, Eric.
Welcome. Good to have you here. All right. Any other public comment? Then moving on to the approval of the minutes, we'll let Commissioner Butt have the first chance at making a motion if he wishes to do so.
Move approval.
All right. Motion to approve by Commissioner Butt, second by Commissioner Taylor. Any further comments on the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Next item is the consent calendar, which will be a free-for-all. This is a series of items that we will act on in one consolidated motion unless anyone wishes to remove an item. Is there anyone who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Okay. Motion by Commissioner Taylor, second by Commissioner Pierce. All those in favor, please say aye. All right, so that will bring us on to item 9, which is a discussion of 3 items regarding State Route 4, Balfour Road interchange. And is it staff's preference to take them one at a time or essentially consider them as a package?
I can do it either way. It's your preference.
I think
Okay.
Let's do a
All right.
package.
All right, I shall proceed. Good morning, Commissioners. Susan Miller, Director of Projects. The next 3 items relate to utility relocations required for State Route 4 Balfour Road Interchange project. These relocations need to occur in advance of the main project construction, so it's very important that we get these utilities out of the way first. The first item is for an amendment to PG&E's existing utility agreement for joint utility trench relocation services to add what is commonly referred to as a shoe fly. which is a temporary wood pole system where they have the lines moved from underground temporarily to the wood poles while they do construction in the roadway. This was not originally envisioned, but became apparent when joint trench construction started. Some good news is that PG&E has finished their transmission tower relocation work, and they will be starting back on the joint trench work as early as next week, I believe. So staff in this instance is seeking authorization for amendment number 1 to agreement number 410 in the amount of $500,000, which is the authority's share of the total cost for the shoe fly item. The second item is for a new agreement with AT&T, who has existing lines in Balfour Road that will relocate first to the shoe fly and then to the new joint trench once constructed. So with this item, staff is seeking authorization for the chair to execute a new utility agreement, number 436, with AT&T in the amount of $372,908 to provide those utility relocation services. The very last item is the most complicated and addresses replacement in function of an existing Kinder Morgan petroleum pump station and 10-inch pipeline that is currently in the interchange footprint. The bypass authority is handling the necessary right-of-way work associated with the replacement parcel to relocate Kinder Morgan facility from the interchange parcel. Attachment A on this board item is a draft memorandum of understanding between the authority, Kinder Morgan, and the bypass authority, which outlines the processes and responsibilities for each party. The MOU includes as executable attachments 5 right-of-way documents, which will be executed between the bypass authority and Kinder Morgan, so we're not signatory to those agreements. But it also has as an attachment a utility agreement for construction, which we are signatory to. That agreement is between the authority and Kinder Morgan. The authority's attorneys have been very heavily involved in reviewing these documents and assisting staff, since the relocation is quite complicated and the existing Kinder Morgan site has known contamination, which must be remediated by Kinder Morgan at their expense. So draft documents are attached. I will have an updated version for the authority meeting, so the documents will be updated for the authority meeting. We're currently having a great many conference calls between all attorneys involved. With that, staff would request authorization for the chair to execute the Memorandum of Understanding 50.05.01, which is between the authority, the State Route 4 Bypass Authority, and Kinder Morgan, and authorization to execute utility agreement number 420 in the amount of $5,412,000 with Kinder Morgan, and allow the executive director to make any non-substantive changes to the language. And of course, our attorneys will be reviewing any changes to the language on these agreements.
Thank you. Are there questions regarding the staff report? Commissioner Butt.
Does somebody, well, first of all, do these utilities and pipeline companies provide detailed breakdowns of their cost proposals?
They do give us detailed breakdowns of their cost proposals, and then in this instance, Kinder will advertise and administer construction for the new site, and we will receive all the bids, and we will be able to review all the detail involved, and they'll bill us at actual cost. So when the bills come in, we will have the appropriate level of detail to review those.
So
costs.
they actually bid this work out, all of them?
They will, for their own facility, for the relocation and the
Yeah.
demolition of the existing pump plant facility, Kinder Morgan will be built advertising and administering that contract.
Okay, so these are estimated costs and not actual?
These are estimated costs at this point in
And
time.
what happens if they come in over?
Per the agreement, there's an allowance of 25% to go over the agreement, and that's what this number is.
And if they come in under,
includes
then
It's actual
then
cost.
it's less money?
Then we will not
okay.
spend that. We'll close the agreement out with that money, which will go back to that project.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Taylor.
Yeah. Oh, this might even go to you, Ross, also. First of all, we can't really go out on contract until this is moved, correct?
That's correct. We need to have the utilities move because they're right in the middle of where we'll be constructing the interchange first before we go out with the interchange construction.
Okay, the second thing, we got Dale Dennis working real hard. I know that because I signed some papers yesterday. But the other issue is Africa and transplant. I think Africa, we're going to, I'm chair of Africa, so we're also going to, hopefully we're going to give some money to, can you help me on this? And then what are we doing with transplant?
Yeah, so Mayor Taylor's bringing up a conversation. So we're in the process of updating the Measure J strategic plan. And under this cycle, there's $10 million available to transplant. So working with that and working between ECRIFA, assuming this project remains a priority, which has been a priority for both of them, we'll be able to, or we believe we'll be able to close the gap, the funding gap.
Okay, because I can guarantee you, I have not heard anything from my counterparts on transplant and our Africa on the sense that we do not wish this to stop. If anything, we need to get this thing done. It's been
I think everyone,
time, and let's move it, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, and I think everyone knows this is really the last big project to complete the modernization of Highway 4 out there. So we'll get this project done and then start working on other priorities.
All right. Thank you. I just want to make sure of clarification.
Commissioner Arnott.
Thank you, and I appreciate what Mr. Taylor was just saying. That was one of my main questions is how are we paying for this? We're bleeding a lot out there. I mean, the Highway 4, if you add up just the cost of all the change orders since we started these projects, it exceeds some regions' total Measure J money. But focusing on Kinder Morgan, it's almost a $9 million contract. And you mentioned on this next phase they're bidding out. How much of the $9 million goes to Kinder Morgan versus subcontract work?
You know, I'd have to look at the detail on that, but proportionally, they're subbing out their design. So they have consultants doing the design work. So the staffing, if you're asking about the staffing itself, is a more minimal part of the overall cost because they have environmental subs. They have looking at what they have to do to clear the site. You know, we have burrowing owls out there and this kind of thing. So a lot of it is they're hiring consultants that will assist with these services.
It may just have been linguistics, but the way you said it before, you said that the site is clean. However, they're responsible to mitigate.
K-N-O-W-N. I went
Oh.
back and looked at
Right,
Stafford
right.
because I heard the same thing you did.
Yeah.
I heard N-O.
No.
K-N-O-W-N.
No.
There are no skills.
No, okay, I didn't
No,
hear the
I'm
N
sorry.
Yeah.
K-N-O-W-N. There is no.
Linguistics.
And so on that note, that's the existing site, and Kinder Morgan is on the hook financially to do that remediation work. We are not paying for that.
So, big picture, high level, I love the corn out there. It's sweet, and he's a pretty sweet guy. What other variables do we have out here? If we're going to go look for money and solve this, we ought to try to solve everything. So do we anticipate any other issues surrounding these or any of the other utilities? Or do you think we've discovered everything we need to know at this point?
Well, we hope we've discovered everything that is known out there. We spent a great deal of time on these utilities, working with them, going out to the field, doing reconnaissance, doing additional potholing, looking at all the factors out there that could influence cost increases on this. So we've come back now, I feel, with much more refined numbers than what we kind of had previously had. So we've worked a lot. Spent a lot of time. We have weekly conference calls with Kinder Morgan, and now we've been having, in addition to that, weekly attorney calls on all the various different agreements.
Great. Well, thank you for overseeing that. Anything on the construction side? I mean, we've gotten through everything. You know, we've had a few issues, weather, drying.
You know,
anything else on the horizon?
staging is going to be very tricky. We know that. It's a main avenue for the public. So we've been working with city staff on, restrictions that we'll need to put into the contract for staging to allow traffic to keep flowing through that area. And we know we have burrowing owl out there. We know that. So we're probably going to need a full-time biologist. I would recommend we just assume that now. And so in our staffing plan, we have that. And I think actually Ivan's already looked into that. Yeah, already looked into that, and he's already addressing that. We do have the CM team on board, so they've been looking at the plans. I think they did a 65% or 95% constructability review, and so they've looked at that, and we have them on board. They also will be out there observing and looking at the utility relocations as they occur, especially the joint trench work, so they'll be very familiar with where we're putting in the new facilities. And we'll be doing some survey work also to pinpoint those.
Commissioner Arnold, if I may ask, it sounds like your question was addressed what we've learned and what's happening on the rest of the corridor. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of overall, because we're making a decision, and we want to be able to make sure we know all the implications of making this. There's a big chunk of change we got to find, and getting ECRFA and transplant, ECRFA's on board, but it's important that we have that money there and we can look everybody in the eye and say, yep, here's how we accounted for it, and we all have the same priorities.
Yeah, so as Susan explained, these utilities have been ongoing for a long time, and I feel pretty comfortable. We've fleshed it out well. There's been a number of alternatives looked at, and this seems to be the one that works and will allow us to proceed to construction. And then, as Susan pointed out, too, we've learned a lot about the environment out there with the burrowing owls and other things, so we're making those adjustments into our contracts.
Great. Okay, thank you. Appreciate all the input.
All right.
Final question.
Certainly.
Through Chair. You made a comment, and I'm not used to hearing it. All the attorneys involved. Attorneys scare the hell out of me. So the minute I hear that, I get really nervous. All the attorneys involved.
Well, because
what does that entail?
It's our attorneys, and Mala has engaged a specialist from their firm who is used to dealing with oil pipeline and those types of agreements, and she's been quite helpful. And then the bypass authority has county counsel involved because they're doing the right-of-way actions. And then, of course, Kinder has their set of attorneys.
Kinder's. So we have lots of attorneys.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's moving forward. I'm very comfortable with our representation.
Well, I'm not worried about our representation. I'm worried about other representation.
You're comfortable.
Yeah, but you're comfortable, right? Ross, are we good? Too? There you go. Thumbs up. Okay.
I'd be willing to make a motion.
Well, I just had a quick question. I just wanted to clarify that your sense is that while there's discussion in the staff report of a funding shortfall, that work is underway to solve that by the time we would be ready to go to construction. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I believe so. So right now, the funding we need is probably in the $15 to $17 million range. Still working to nail that down. I think it gets back to Commissioner Butt's comments. Again, assuming it's a priority out there, which I know it is, there'll be a way to fix it.
Okay. And then my second question is, I understand that Kinder Morgan is responsible for remediation of the spills on their property, and so they're going to pay the cost. What encouragement do we provide them to do that in a timely manner so that their cleanup activity doesn't delay the overall project?
Well, I can say that the engineering staff I'm working with, they've been really good and they're very aggressive. So they're really going to the brink of doing as much design, and they have people on board already that will be primed to address that. So it's a matter of getting the agreements executed and getting all the right-of-way documents in order. And I think that will not be a holdup because they already have those people lined up and they know exactly what they have to do. They're under an order from the State Water Quality Control Board. And so they know exactly what the plan is and exactly what they have to do to satisfy the Water Quality Control Board.
And is this a complicated cleanup or a...
Not really. They have to excavate down about 10 feet and then do some testing. They've had monitoring wells in place for quite some time.
Okay. Thank you. So I think Commissioner Butt.
So does that mean they've had leaks in their pipeline? Is that the?
It's in the vicinity of the pump station, the existing pump station.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay. So Commissioner Arnridge wishes to make a motion?
Yeah, I would actually on the last point is, the good news is by effectively relocating this, we're cleaning this up to 21st century standards. It's an old pumping station. And the only place that system leaks is where they have those joints. So I think as expensive as this is, I think it's good for everybody to get this done. I'd be willing to move items number 9.1, 9.2, 9.3 as presented here today.
I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye, it's unanimous. Which brings us on to item 10, a discussion of the I-80 San Pablo Dam Road Interchange Reconstruction Project. Mr. Ramirez.
Good morning, Commissioner Tatson and Chair Tatson, Commissioners. I hope everybody breathes a sigh of relief that there's no railroad out there on Balfour Avenue project. That's a risk we don't have to deal with. This is an action item. It's related to the construction project on Interstate 80 in San Pablo Dam Road, the Phase 1 project. At this point, in December 2014 board meeting, staff was authorized to advertise, administer, and award the construction contract. At this point, staff expects the plan specification and estimate to be completed later this month or at the beginning of next month, but the actual design is not 100% complete. So with that in mind, we're asking the board to approve the executive director to approve the design when completed, and then to advertise the construction contract, approve changes and issue addenda during the advertisement, and publicly open all bids received. Now, a little bit of a change here from what we normally do is that normally the board approves the design once completed, but in order to keep the progress moving, we're asking the executive director to do that. With that, I'm open to any questions.
Are there questions of Mr. Ramirez? Commissioner Taylor.
I guess the question I'm asked, when we move this to the executive director, which I have no issue with that, we get an update of what went down?
Absolutely. We have to come back to you to award the construction contract.
That's okay. I just wanted to, we got to watch that guy.
Commissioner Arnridge.
So it'll come back to us. We'll get to see the scheme, and obviously this is being worked out with a local jurisdiction, and I'm okay with it as long as Ross gets to look at Randy's shoulder too. So.
All right. Seeing no further questions of someone. Okay. Motion by Commissioner Taylor, second by Commissioner Pierce to approve item 10. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Which brings us to item 11, more authorization for the executive director.
So, yeah, this is related to the previous item. As previously stated, Government Code Section 830.6 establishes design immunity as an affirmative defense for public agencies, the authority, in case of injuries caused by the design of the public works improvement. So at this point, the staff seeks authorization for the executive director to use his discretionary authority to approve or reject designs of authority administered construction projects on an ongoing basis. So it's similar to the situation we have now with San Pablo Dam Road. We might have other situations, some of them which I outlined in the staff report, where it might be prudent for the executive director to have that authority so that we can the construction schedule going. So working with our legal counsel, they recommended that a resolution be used for that purpose, and that's what we're coming to you today. I want to mention something that was brought up to my attention yesterday. Chair Tatson suggested that we add to the resolution a provision that states that staff is going to come back to you at a later date, probably within 3 years, and let you know how this process is working, and see if you anything that we have learned or any improvements that we can make. and that will be part of our continued improvement in our processes as we move forward. I want to say that our plan is to introduce that provision, and it probably won't be 3 years before we come back to you. We'll probably come back sooner to let you know if we need to make any adjustments to this resolution. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, Commissioner Butt.
Can you explain to me a little bit more about this design immunity? Who actually is immunized? Is it the executive director or the authority or the board or all three or what?
Yeah, it is all three. It will be
All
staff,
three?
it will be the
Yeah.
authority as a whole. If there's an injury as a result of the design that was constructed, there is a provision, and I have the email that the attorney sent to me, and I will be happy to share it with you, but it's one of the conditions. It has to be established that the injury was caused by the design, and that will provide immunity to us.
What about the design professionals who actually do the design? Are they immunized too?
Not by this section of the law, no.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Arnerich.
Tom, did you have another question? No. Ivan, thank you for the presentation. The question I had, or maybe it's a statement, I guess between this and the previous item, I think it's all fine, but not the norm. What I mean by that, we shouldn't use this just because it's fast and convenient. We ought to use it because we need to use it. So if we're a few days away and it doesn't impact a project, we ought to still be bringing it to the board in the normal way. So I would support this with that understanding so that.
One comment in regards to that, Commissioner, is that one of the things that we found out during this process of talking to our legal counsel is that when we issue an addenda to the already approved drawings that actually changes the design, it will require another approval by the body. So maybe what we can do in the future, my suggestion would be that we come in and say, approve the plans, and if there's any addenda that changes the design, then maybe we can delegate that to the executive director. Will that be something that
Yeah, I think something like that. I just, again, just for protocol, that sometimes we are a small, lean organization, that while we want to race to do it, quite often, these are long-term projects. They are time sensitive sometimes, just to make sure that the normal checks and balances are always there. And we use this expeditiously, cautiously where we need to.
Yeah, and keep in mind that prior to even coming to this stage, we come to you for permission to actually award and administer and advertise the construction contract. So there are several steps along the way that you have opportunity to comment in.
Great.
And, that's perfectly fine. That I agree with your comment. We'll bring it to your for approval as a normal, ongoing way of doing business. In situations where we think we might need this authority from the executive director, then we'll also let you know that that's the situation in which we're going to use it.
Okay. Any other questions? And then I had made the suggestion yesterday that there be which Mr. Ramirez commented on, that there be a update to the authority periodically of how this new power is being used and what we've learned from it, and whether it's a benefit to continue. And so I think that would come back along with Commissioner Arnerich's comment in the report to the authority, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioner Pierce.
Yeah, I think this is all fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think when these intermittent approvals take place, however, I think there ought to be just a report slipped into the next authority packet just to say, oh, by the way, we made a change of X.
That's fine.
So that we know the impacts. It's part of the information, and it just comes out as, it's a consent calendar thing or just for information only, but just so that people know that it's happened.
Okay. Well, you could make that part of the executive director's report when it occurs.
Sure.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
There's no problem here.
So, okay. So,
So I move to recommend this item move forward to
okay.
the full board based on two items.
Right. There's a motion by Commissioner Arnerich, second by Commissioner Taylor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item is a discussion of 4 resolutions regarding the Hercules Intermodal Transit Center. which involve additional funding and some modifications to our existing agreements. And Mr. Chittenden.
Yes, thank you, Chair
I know we
Tatson.
have a large group here from Hercules. So
Yes,
welcome.
we do, and I am sure they were very delighted to hear Mr. Watts's comment that they were going to try to go back for some of the transportation congestion relief program funding. So maybe it's definitely worthwhile coming over today. But not heard a lot about CCTA and our construction program, but we're not the only agency that likes to advance their construction program with Measure J funds, and I think that's a good description of this project here. So we have as an action item related to the Hercules Intermodal Center, or Hercules ITC. You've heard it referred to that over the years. And this committee has seen this project a number of times for various actions, including some of the revisions that are on the agenda here today. I do want to point out that this action's a little unique in that it has a combination of funding from funds programmed in the Measure J strategic plan for the Hercules Rail Station, as well as funds from Program 12 and 13 in our program section, the Transportation for Livable Communities and Bike and Ped and Trails Facilities program. So we're running it through both committees, the Planning Committee and the APC, and you'll see Mr. Beck sitting in the back eagerly awaiting the outcome. Last night at the Planning Committee, they recommended approval of the appropriation request for the programs that they administer. So that's for the TLC and the PBTF programs. You have a fairly lengthy staff report with a summary of the history of the project and the actions taken by this body, current status, and some information about the next phase of the project referred to as the Path to Transit. So I do not intend to repeat any of that. The requested actions, as noted by the chair, are for 4 resolutions. It's revision to 2 resolutions related to the Hercules train station project and 2 new resolutions for the program's funding. And they start on page 12-5 of your staff report. So specifically, we're asking to revise resolution 12-06-P, which was related to an appropriation to acquire right-of-way for the station. That resolution had some conditions, and the city is seeking to extend the date for some of those conditions. We seek to revise resolution 12-08-P. This is funding out of the Measure J strategic plan for the Hercules Rail Station. The request is to modify the scope of the resolution to include the Bay Trail project, which is currently under construction, and to increase the appropriation by $2 million, which would provide funding to the city and allow them to award the Path to Transit contract. The new resolutions begin on page 12-7. And again, these are for the Planning Committee. I just want to read them to you so you have the full story. Resolution 15-42G is a new appropriation from the TLC program. And you'll see in a presentation to be made by the city how that would be used. And on the next page, resolution 15-43G, which is an appropriation for the PBTF program for a trail that would be constructed by next to the restored Refugio Creek. And you'll see that again in the presentation here. So I would like to turn it over to the contingency for a presentation. I know it'll be kicked off by our good friend and big supporter of the project, Mayor Sherry McCoy, and to be followed by City Manager David Biggs and Public Works Director Mike Roberts. And before I turn it over, I do want to just point out that if you approve this action, there will be a minor revision before we go to the board. As written, the funds are for construction, and the city's request was for both construction and construction support. We looked at ways to consolidate all the funding into construction just for ease of administration, and due to restrictions on other dollars, we weren't able to do that. It does not it does not change the amount of the request, and really doesn't change the intent of the request. It just is we'll change a few words in the resolution to give the city that flexibility if we move forward with this request. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mayor McCoy.
Welcome. You can either stand or take a seat, whichever you prefer.
Thank you, Ross, and Sherry McCoy, Mayor of the City of Hercules. The Intermodal Transit Center in Hercules is a major project which will represent a benefit to the City of Hercules. Am I not? Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. West County and the region as a whole, enhancing not only regional connectivity as a transit hub and transit-oriented development, but also with components in the future that will aid in goods movement in conjunction with advances on this corridor that were recently announced. This phase, the Path to Transit, will provide the initial level of transit not only within the local community, but will also draw cars off the highly congested I-80 corridor through easy access to bus service. The recently completed Bay Trail segment gives bike and pedestrian access to the ITC. Future phases will add additional transit options to the ITC. Through this phased approach, each provides independent transit benefits as well as stepping stones to the full project. As the number one priority for the City of Hercules, the community is working on this project for a long time, has been actively engaged in the process, and celebrates each phase along the way. The City and I thank you for your ongoing support of this project and hope you will approve this appropriation of funds for the Path to Transit phase. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like me to see if there are any questions now or wait until you finish all the presentations?
Why don't we do the questions at the end?
That would be fine.
And next is our City Manager, David Bay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy early 4th of July. I've just completed my first year of service in the City of Hercules, and I'd like to say the parade they're putting on Saturday is in honor of my first anniversary. But would like to invite all of you to attend if you'd like to. It's a relatively small celebration with the parade at 10:45. I'll be in the parade, but I'm going to be doing a servant leader role. I'm going to be cleaning up after the equestrian unit. So that's sort of this dual purposing, you know. Very happy to do that instead of just riding in the parade. In the first year in Hercules, one of the things that I've been most greatly impressed with is the level of enthusiasm and support from our local community for hosting what is really a regional serving facility here in the form of the Regional Intermodal Transportation Center. We had last night when we appeared before the authorities planning committee, there were 2 local residents from the waterfront that were in attendance and spoke in favor. They couldn't be here again today. But as I'm out and about the community, when I get calls, people are quite anxious to see when the next phases are going to be coming online because they actually bought into the creation of this transit-oriented community down there. So the good news is that you've got a community that's willing to host a regional facility and actively embrace it, which sometimes is not always the case as we look at placing these important facilities throughout the region. You know, the nice thing about this facility, as you all know, it's fairly unique. It'll link ferry service in the future together with transit, expanded transit service, and rail service. The existing Hercules Transit Center, which serves as a bus hub, has demonstrated the ability to draw people off of Highway 80. It doesn't just serve local folks through its informal carpooling, express Transbay bus service, together with the WestCat JX service and JPX service that connects right to BART for people who aren't going into the city, but also go to Oakland and other points in the East Bay. The good news is the Regional Intermodal Transportation Center has been successful in attracting a lot of funding sources. So CCTA is not just partnering with the city and some of our local resources, but also with other funding sources. The first phase, the Path to Transit, which is also creating the platform for the third rail through the area, has a Tiger grant, and that was done in conjunction with East Bay Regional Parks. We have, though, these multiple funding sources, and Ross and your staff here have been a great help to us, do lead to some complications in trying to balance timing and how they've been programmed. And overall, I think we've had great success in keeping things together. We have submitted a Tiger grant for the next phase of funding. We were in the top 5% in the last go-round. I think having the Path to Transit, which we're talking about today, under construction will be very helpful because it really shows we're able to deliver on those next phases. We have great level of support from a variety of organizations. The county congressional delegation wrote a joint letter of support for the application. Caltrans, the rail operators in the area, including Union Pacific, the state legislation, our state legislators, and Caltrans. Also, the East Bay Leadership Council has been very supportive of the project on an ongoing basis. Now, what you'll hear from our Public Works Director in a few minutes as we get into some more detail is we have realigned some of the phases of the project, and that's been based on advice from Ross and your staff here to work very hard to get a train to stop. Certain elements have been scaled down as far as we're going with more base infrastructure as far as the station and platform, because we recognize getting a train to stop here is the most valuable element of the overall strategy of the project. The area is also a California Catalyst project. It's a priority development area under the MTC and ABAG frameworks in the area. It's the anchor to this end of what is the county's Northern Waterfront Initiative that we've been active participants with our friends to the east. And also there's an existing transit-oriented community there, the existing neighborhoods, and why we had the residents here last night, very walkable, lots of paths in the area. They're looking forward to transit. Even recently, your staff referred a call to me from a resident Pinole who was wanting to know the status. He'd like to commute from Pinole via Hercules to Martinez for work every day. So it's going to be an interesting opportunity for people to use alternative transportation. And it's building on this existing new urbanist neighborhood. Our city staff, since I've been there over the course of the year, we've geared up to be able to successfully deliver the project. I've been there a year, very hands-on and involved. It's, again, my top priority for the city. Our new Public Works Director, Mike Roberts, that you'll hear from in a few moments, is actively engaged in the project. And we are going to be adding a dedicated project manager as we get into this next phase and future phases. So the city is very well equipped to deliver, especially the next phase, which is really extension of an existing road, bridge across Refugio Creek, and restoration of the creek, because we've managed those types of projects in the past. I do think as we get into working in the railroad right-of-way and things, that's when we'll again look perhaps to tap some expertise here at CCTA that would stretch us a bit further beyond our current capabilities. We're looking forward to your appropriation of the Measure J funds, which have been programmed for the project to allow us to move forward to this next phase. We're out to bid at the moment. We're expecting to award the contract on July 28th. We're going to have our permits in hand in July here from the regional board, and the executive officer there, deputy executive officer, has been very helpful in getting us to that point. And we're looking forward then to having commencement of construction in August. Also, just by the by, in September, we'll be opening the first phase, which is the new Bay Trail segment. So be sure to bring your walking shoes, but we will be doing a little community festival and opening that for the first use. You'll hear more about that in Mike's presentation. So that I'll turn it over to Mike Roberts, and we'd be happy to answer your questions after he completes his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Townsend and Commissioners. As David said, I'm Mike Roberts. I'm the new Public Works Director for the City of Hercules. I'm electing to sit today because I haven't allowed myself to succumb to bifocals, just since here it's a little too long. But thank you for the opportunity to give a short presentation on the Path to Transit phase of the Regional Intermodal Transit Center, which we're very excited about in Hercules. And this will be a team effort with Terry Bowen from Gray Bowen Scott. So the vision of the ITC is a convergence of train, bus, and ferry service in a single location. It'll be the first such facility in West County, or in the West Coast, and will serve as a major transportation hub for West County and the region. The ITC is strategically located along the Interstate 80 corridor, which is one of the most heavily congested routes in the Bay Area, at the intersection of State Route 4. It's approximately 3/4 of a mile off the main line, about a 2-minute drive, which is, to my way of thinking, a fairly short distance as I come in from Antioch on Highway 4. It's also within walking distance from existing and future planned transit-oriented developments on the shoreline overlooking the San Pablo Bay. So there's a phased approach being implemented for the ITC to reflect current funding opportunities. Each phase has independent utility and public benefits in addition to incrementally advancing the ITC to completion. The first phase is the Bay Trail East, which is currently under construction. The Path to Transit, the subject of this morning, has 3 components: the John Muir Parkway extension, Bayfront Boulevard extension, and then the Refugio Creek Trail installation. And the primary goal of this phase is to establish transit service and trail connectivity to the region. The Bay Trail West, off to your left, would complete the Bay Trail into Pinole, and we're assessing that project for next summer. So the city has been busy delivering this first phase of the ITC, the Bay Trail East. In August, we'll close out the $11.3 million construction contract, and it will tie into the path to transit. As you can see in these photos, the Bay Trail is constructing two-tiered parallel retaining walls, approximately 3,000 feet long. This is creating the lateral clearance for the new rail tracks for the future rail station. Additionally, it will house 3,000 new feet of multi-purpose Bay Trail, which will be installed in the benched area, and will have existing unobstructed views of the San Pablo Bay. The future railroad track improvements are dependent upon the relocation of fuel and fiber optic lines that are currently located in the railroad right-of-way. This phase is designed and constructed to provide for future relocation of these facilities, also in the benched area. So the path to transit phase is $14.2 million. It's the second phase of the ITC, and again, the subject of your consideration this morning. It's out to bid, as David mentioned. We're opening bids on July 9th, and has three major elements. The first is the extension of John Muir Parkway over North Channel, Bayfront Boulevard over Refugio Creek, and will provide community-friendly features, tree-lined streets, wide sidewalks, pedestrian bulb outs, and such. The primary purpose of this element is to provide multimodal access from I-80, Highway 4, and San Pablo Avenue to the future train station. It also completes connectivity to the Tiger II funded East Bay Trail. This next slide is an artistic rendering of the Bayfront Boulevard Bridge, which will span over Refugio Creek. It serves as the nexus between several elements of the ITC project, including the return leg of the future transit loop. Thank you. So the second major element of Path to Transit is the restoration of 1,500 linear feet of Refugio Creek and also North Channel. It's a precursor to the future relocation and restoration of Refugio Creek at the mouth of the San Pablo Bay, so that it's not in conflict with the future train station and platform. Additionally, the restoration work provides compensatory wetland mitigation for the future rail station. It also includes the installation of the multi-purpose trail, shown in yellow, which will overlook Refugio Creek and connect the ITC to San Pablo and the Ridge Trail beyond. The third major element of Path to Transit is to establish the bus service component of the ITC. As you can see from Westcast's service diagram, the area currently lacks service. So the city is working in partnership with Westcat on the best service delivery options, so service can commence when Path to Transit is completed in fall 2016. The Path to Transit access improvements will increase demand for bus service. Additionally, the city has received requests for bus service from a number of adjacent neighborhoods, which were designed as transit-oriented developments with the ITC in mind. Bus service could include morning and evening express trans-based service for commuters or linkage to the Hercules Transit Center with fixed routes throughout the day. The bus route will be up and down John Muir with a stop on Bayfront Boulevard. Key is to establish an interim loop for the bus to turn around, currently envisioned at the end of Bayfront on vacant property. Last week, City and Westcat staff met with MTC to discuss grant opportunities, and we plan on filing a joint application with Westcat for transportation demand management and managed lane grants. Currently, there's approximately 90 stalls that are available on an interim basis for parking. Funding is also included in the line item in the Path to Transit budget to construct the interim loop, wayfinding signs, and other such amenities. We're looking forward in the coming weeks to working with authority staff to further refine this element. With regards to future phases, the remaining phases will be built as funding becomes available. The city is aggressively pursuing funding opportunities such as local, regional, state, and federal programs. Future phases have been defined so the city can tailor deliverable projects to match fund types. The Bay Trail and Path to Transit phases are funded with approximately a dozen different grants, so the ITC has competed very well in the past, and we anticipate the success will continue into the future. We look forward to working with CCTA as funding opportunities come about. And in conclusion, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Also to thank CCTA staff for all their help, Ross, Ivan, Stephanie, and also Hisham. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you. Are there questions? So I just wanted to clarify so that the improvements that you're making with the sources of money that we would approve now have immediate value upon completion, correct?
Yes, immediate value and independent utilities, specifically Bay Trail connectivity with Path to Transit, and then the new Bay Trail heading northeast to Victoria by the Bay, which then connects to the northern city limits. If we were to construct the Bay Trail West segment next summer, then we'd have a continuous Bay Trail entirely through the city. And then the second major component with independent utility is the bus service. Primary benefit would be the link service offered by WestCat to the Trans-Bay Terminal.
Thank you.
I'll move the item.
There's a motion by Commissioner Butt, a second by Commissioner Taylor. I assume that covers all of the four resolutions. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
And again, this will come back with what Planning Committee did to the authority meeting, correct?
Yeah, so it's already a consolidated item. It's the same staff report. So Brad and I will get together and make a few tweaks, and my recommendation is it's on consent.
Okay, sounds good. All right, then the next item is the quarterly project status report. This is the new format that was staff approved, proposed, and we approved, and it's nice to see it.
And I'll keep it very brief. We just wanted to introduce our first quarterly project study report. As we agreed in March 2015, we combined information from the previously received monthly status reports and the quarterly funding plans into one report into this new format. We hope it will make it easier for you to track progress on projects we're managing or co-managing or projects managed by other local agencies. This first report will establish a baseline for future updates so you can see what changed between one report and another related to cost, schedule, and funding. So with that, this is for your information only.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Big thank you.
I'd like to make a comment. Oh,
Please.
I could understand it.
Great.
No, I mean, this is very good. I think we've been working on this for quite a while, and this really opens it up. If you open it up, it's very good. And I'll shut up there.
I would agree, it's very good. I would ask you to think about one thing for the next version is staff has now taught us to use less paper. And so a lot of us will look at this electronically. And so the pages go from portrait to landscape orientation. And so I'm constantly hitting the rotate clockwise, rotate counterclockwise on every page. So if we can sort of think about that layout, I don't care which it is as long as it works. So I'm happy to hit clockwise or counterclockwise once, but every page is a little much. Okay. But it was really good. So the next item I would just say is moving on to the other items very briefly. As you saw from the press release that the executive director sent out, the San Joaquin JPA took over the San Joaquin service as of yesterday. I didn't hear any reports of problems, so we survived our first day. We are essentially guaranteed 3 years of funding. The state wants us to save a little bit on administrative expenses each year, and one of the things in our business plan is looking at 2 new stations in Contra Costa, Oakley, and Hercules. So, other commissioner comments? All right, executive director comments? All right, then when we are adjourned till our next meeting on September 3rd. Thank you. Yes.